It's early morning, and the soft light falls across the kitchen table. Margaret sits quietly with her cup of tea, listening to the gentle hum of the kettle. Her shoulder aches a little when she reaches for the sugar jar. It's not sharp, just a dull reminder that time has its own rhythm. She smiles anyway, stirring slowly, breathing slowly. At 67, she's learned that rushing rarely helps. Her mornings have become her sanctuary, a space for breathing, moving, and remembering that strength can be gentle. She places the cup down, rolls her shoulders carefully. A soft click, a stretch, and then relief. Outside, birds begin their morning chatter, echoing the rhythm of her breath. Each inhale feels like a small promise of comfort. Each exhale, a quiet release of years of tension. She once thought pain was a sign to stop. Now, she knows it's a whisper to move differently. Not harder, not faster, just slower. And in this calm beginning, her day opens softly. One movement at a time. One breath at a time. Slow, mindful, free. Margaret didn't notice when her shoulders began to change. It wasn't sudden, not a single moment or movement. It crept in quietly, like a slow morning fog settling over the sea. A stiffness after gardening. A twinge while reaching for a plate. A faint pull when she brushed her hair. She told herself it was nothing. Just age, just tiredness, just life. But the truth was simpler. Her body was speaking, and she had stopped listening. For years, Margaret had cared for everyone but herself. She lifted grocery bags, hugged grandkids, stirred heavy pots of soup. She moved through her days with purpose, but without pause. Her shoulders carried the weight of everything she loved. And one quiet morning, that weight asked for care. When she reached to open a window, her arm resisted. A tiny sting ran through her shoulder, surprising her. It wasn't pain that scared her, it was the feeling of weakness. The sense that her body was slowly closing in. She sat down and held her arm gently, breathing through the moment. It passed quickly, but it stayed in her mind all day. That evening she stood before the mirror, tracing her collarbones. Her reflection looked calm, but her body spoke differently. There was tightness under the skin, a quiet fatigue in her joints. She remembered her mother who used to say, "Keep moving no matter what." But she also remembered how her mother stopped moving too soon. That night, Margaret promised herself something. She would learn to move again, but this time slower. She searched for stretches online, scrolling carefully, reading every word. The videos all showed young people bending easily, smiling. Margaret smiled too, but hers was quieter, gentler. She knew she wasn't chasing youth. She was chasing ease. She found a simple routine, a slow shoulder stretch. It didn't look impressive, but it felt kind. The next morning, she stood in her living room, sunlight on her hands. She lifted her arm slowly, like testing the edge of a new beginning. The movement was small, but it felt enormous. Her breath followed, steady, patient, forgiving. Each roll of her shoulder released something invisible. A memory, a worry, a long-forgotten weight. She began to understand that her body wasn't failing. It was adapting, waiting for her attention. And the more she listened, the more it softened. Day by day, the stiffness began to fade. Not completely, but enough to remind her that healing is quiet. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It lives in the gentle moments between breaths. Now, each morning begins the same way. A warm cup of tea, a deep breath, a slow stretch. Margaret doesn't rush anymore. Her movements are stories, small acts of care. And her shoulders, once heavy and tired, feel alive again. Because she learned that strength doesn't come from effort. It comes from awareness, patience, and the courage to move slowly. Margaret had always thought of her shoulders as strong. They had lifted her children, carried groceries, hugged old friends tight. They had held her upright through long days and restless nights. But now she began to see them differently, not as tools of strength, but as a map of her life. Every ache told a story. Every small tension held a memory. She wanted to understand them, these silent companions. So one afternoon, she sat with her neighbor, Dr. Lewis, a retired physiotherapist. They talked over tea, sunlight warming the table between them. Dr. Lewis smiled and said softly, "Your shoulders are the body's storytellers." Margaret tilted her head, curious, waiting for him to explain. He told her that the shoulders are not just joints. They are a delicate bridge between movement and emotion. They carry not only muscles and bones, but feelings too. The bones, the collarbone, the shoulder blade, the humerus form a frame of freedom. The muscles, the rotator cuff, the deltoid, the trapezius, they dance around that frame. Each part depends on the others. If one tightens, all follow. If one relaxes, balance returns. He explained how the shoulder joint is the most mobile in the body. It allows us to lift, reach, stretch, embrace, and create. But that freedom comes with a price: vulnerability. As we age, the soft tissues dry, the tendons lose elasticity. The muscles weaken if they are ignored. Even posture changes, pulling the shoulders forward, closing the chest. And when that happens, pain begins to whisper. Margaret listened carefully, her fingers tracing the rim of her teacup. She thought of all the times she had ignored those whispers. She remembered the way her body had tried to speak long before the pain began. Dr. Lewis continued, "The body is wise but quiet. It waits for us to listen." He described how movement helps the shoulder stay alive. Slow rotations keep the joint lubricated, feeding it with blood and oxygen. Gentle stretches allow the tendons to breathe again. Even breathing deeply helps open the chest, easing the tension that gathers there. Margaret imagined her shoulders not as stiff hinges, but as living roots. Roots that could be nourished with care, patience, and time. She asked him, "So the secret is to keep moving?" He smiled again, "To move but slowly, to respect your pace." She nodded, understanding that this was not just about exercise. It was about trust, trusting her body again after years of silence. When she walked home that evening, she felt lighter. The air touched her skin differently, softer somehow. She rolled her shoulders once, just to feel them move. There was still tightness, but now she saw it as conversation. Her body was speaking, and she was finally ready to listen. That night before bed, she whispered a quiet promise: to honor her shoulders not for their strength, but for their stories, and to meet each new day with slow, grateful movement. The first time Margaret tried moving slowly, she felt strange. Her body wanted to rush, to finish the movement quickly. Years of doing everything fast had become her habit. She cooked fast, walked fast, even relaxed fast. But slow felt like learning a new language. She stood in her living room, hands at her sides, eyes closed. She took a deep breath and began to lift her shoulders gently. The air moved through her chest, soft and quiet. For a moment she felt resistance, like her body didn't trust the stillness. Then something shifted. Her muscles released just a little. She could feel warmth spreading through her back. It wasn't dramatic, but it was real. She realized that slowing down wasn't weakness. It was awareness. It was choosing to feel instead of forcing to achieve. Each movement asked for her full attention. Her breath became her rhythm, her guide. She noticed the sound of the clock, the light on the curtains, the hum of the world. The slower she moved, the more she saw. And the more she saw, the more she understood. Dr. Lewis's words echoed in her mind. The body listens when you move slowly. She began to see her stretches not as exercises, but as conversations. A quiet exchange between breath and body, between patience and pain. When she moved fast, she missed the signals. When she slowed down, every part of her spoke clearly. The shoulder wasn't just a hinge, it was a teacher. It taught her about limits, about balance, about grace. Slow movement gave her permission to be gentle with herself. And that gentleness started to change everything. Her mornings no longer began with stiffness, but with curiosity. Each day she asked her body, "How are you today?" And each stretch answered in its own way. Sometimes with ease, sometimes with tightness, but always with truth. She realized that pain was not her enemy. It was a messenger guiding her toward care. The slower she moved, the more her body trusted her again. She no longer chased the idea of being flexible or strong. She was learning something deeper, how to be present. In slow movement, there was healing. Not the quick kind, not the kind you see in mirrors, but the quiet kind, the kind that grows beneath the surface. The kind that teaches you to listen before you act, to breathe before you move, to feel before you fix. One evening after her slow stretch, Margaret sat by the window. The sunset painted her living room in soft gold. Her shoulders felt light, her breath deep, her heart calm. She smiled to herself, realizing that she had found something precious. The power of slow, the art of moving with kindness, and the simple truth that sometimes slowing down is the fastest way to heal. The morning was quiet when Margaret began her new routine. A pale light slipped through the curtains, brushing the floor like silk. She stood by the window, her breath slow and steady. The world outside still yawned awake, soft, unhurried, peaceful. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Let's begin." Her feet grounded gently to the floor, her spine tall but relaxed. She rolled her shoulders back, tiny circles, patient and calm. The movement felt small at first, almost invisible. But within seconds, warmth began to bloom beneath her skin. She inhaled deeply, letting the air fill her chest like a wave. On the exhale, she imagined the stiffness leaving her body. Her arms felt lighter, freer, like they remembered something ancient. She lifted her right arm across her chest, holding it softly with her left hand. There was a quiet stretch, a pull that was neither pain nor ease. It felt like her body saying, "Yes, I remember this." She held it there for a few slow breaths. Inhale, exhale, let go. She repeated the movement on the other side, slower this time. Each breath carried her deeper into comfort. Her shoulders began to loosen, her neck released its tension. Next, she raised both arms gently overhead, fingertips reaching for the sky. Her palms opened, her chest lifted, her breath flowed like wind through leaves. She stayed there, floating between effort and rest. Then she slowly lowered her arms, opening them wide like wings. Her breath matched the rhythm, inhale to rise, exhale to open. It felt graceful, almost like dancing in stillness. She placed her hands on her shoulders and drew small circles with her elbows. The motion made her spine sway gently, easing every joint. There was a faint crack, a soft reminder of movement rediscovered. She smiled, eyes closed, feeling alive in her simplicity. No music, no mirror, no pressure, just breath and body in harmony. After a few minutes, she stopped and let her arms fall naturally by her sides. Her heartbeat was calm, her breath smooth, her mind quiet. She could feel the space inside her shoulders widen, as if the tension had made room for light. Margaret rested her hands over her heart. She whispered softly, "Thank you." Not to anyone in particular, just to her body for showing up. Each stretch had been a conversation, a reunion. Her shoulders no longer felt like strangers. They felt like old friends she'd finally remembered to greet. She stood there a little longer, breathing in peace. The air outside carried the scent of morning dew and jasmine. She felt connected to her body, to her breath, to her life. When she finally sat down, the pain was not gone, but it was quiet. Quiet enough to remind her that healing takes time. Quiet enough to let her know she was on the right path. And in that silence, Margaret found something rare, gentle strength. The kind that grows not from doing more, but from moving slow. Days turned into weeks, and Margaret began to notice the change. It wasn't sudden, like a miracle. It was gentle, quiet, almost invisible. One morning, she reached for the top shelf without thinking. Her arm lifted easily, her shoulder followed without protest. She paused midair, surprised by the absence of pain. It felt like freedom, small but extraordinary. Her breath deepened, and a soft smile formed. That was the moment she realized her slow practice was working. Her body had started to remember what comfort felt like. Dr. Lewis had told her once, "Movement is medicine, but patience is the dose." Now she understood what he meant. Each gentle stretch had been a drop of healing. Each mindful breath, a quiet restoration. Her shoulders moved with a rhythm that felt natural again. Not perfect, but alive. The science behind it was simple, though it felt like magic. Slow movement increased blood flow to her joints. It nourished the tendons, softened the stiffness. Her posture began to shift, shoulders open, chest lifted. Even her breathing changed. It became longer, deeper, calmer. Her nights grew more peaceful, her mornings brighter. She no longer woke up with the heavy ache that used to greet her. Instead, she felt warmth where tension once lived. Her grandkids noticed too. "Grandma, you move like a dancer," one of them said. She laughed, shaking her head, but deep down she felt proud. Not because she moved beautifully, but because she moved freely. The slow shoulder stretches had done more than ease pain. They had given her awareness, a deeper connection with herself. Each day, she became more mindful of her movements. How she lifted the kettle. How she reached for her coat. How she carried the groceries. Everything became part of her practice. A living meditation in motion. Sometimes she would sit by the window and think about the body's wisdom. How it always tries to heal, even when we forget to help it. She realized that strength wasn't about resistance. It was about surrender, letting go of the rush, the pressure, the fear. Her body had never asked for perfection. It had only ever asked for attention. And through slow, consistent care, she had learned to listen. She could feel the difference deep inside her bones. The stretches didn't just change her shoulders. They softened her mind, calmed her thoughts, eased her heart. She moved through her days with new grace, like time itself had slowed for her. Neighbors began asking about her secret. She would smile and say, "Just a few minutes a day, moving slowly. No pills, no heavy routines, no grand effort. Just patience, just breath, just the simple gift of slowing down long enough to heal." And in every slow shoulder roll, she found a new kind of peace, steady, lasting, and kind. It had been 3 months since Margaret began her slow shoulder stretches. The days passed softly, marked by small rituals and quiet victories. Her mornings no longer began with hesitation. They began with gratitude. The moment she opened her eyes, her body already knew what to do. She would sit up slowly, breathe deeply, and roll her shoulders in gentle circles. The sound of her breath filled the room like calm music. It became her morning song. At first, she had to remind herself to stretch. Now, it felt as natural as brushing her hair or making tea. It wasn't exercise anymore. It was part of who she was. Sometimes she stretched in the garden, surrounded by the scent of roses. Other times in her kitchen, waiting for water to boil. Wherever she was, her shoulders moved like flowing water. Slow, deliberate, alive. She had turned the practice into a habit, and the habit into a joy. Her friends noticed the change before she did. "You stand taller these days," one said. Margaret smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. "Yes," she replied, "I feel lighter." It wasn't just about her shoulders anymore. It was about her spirit, steadier, freer, more patient. Even her posture seemed to carry a quiet confidence. She no longer hunched when she walked. Her steps had rhythm, her gestures had calm. Each movement reminded her that healing is not a finish line. It's a way of living. The slow stretches had taught her more than anatomy. They had taught her presence. Every motion, every breath, was a gentle lesson in mindfulness. She learned to notice how her body responded to care. She learned that consistency mattered more than intensity. A few minutes every day was enough to keep her body open. Some mornings her shoulders still felt tight. But instead of frustration, she met it with kindness. She would breathe, stretch, and whisper, "It's okay." Because healing, she discovered, is not about eliminating pain. It's about learning to move with it. One evening, as the sky turned orange and pink, she looked back at her journey. From stiffness and fear to freedom and flow. She had built this change one slow breath at a time. She thought of others her age, struggling with pain, afraid to begin. And she wished they could feel this too, this quiet power of movement. So she started sharing her routine with friends in the neighborhood. They would gather in the park, moving slowly together, laughing softly. Each stretch was a celebration, each breath a reminder. They weren't chasing youth, they were embracing life. Margaret looked around, smiling, her shoulders loose and light. She realized she wasn't just preventing pain anymore. She was nurturing vitality, peace, and connection. And as the last light of day touched her face, she felt grateful. For her body, for her patience, for the simple, beautiful gift of slowing down and moving with grace. The sun was setting when Margaret finished her last stretch of the day. Golden light touched her face, soft and warm like a quiet blessing. She breathed deeply, feeling the calm travel through her shoulders. No pain, no rush, just peace. The air outside carried the scent of evening rain and earth. She closed her eyes and smiled. Her body had changed, yes, but so had her heart. The slow movements had become her prayer, her meditation. Each breath a reminder that healing is not about time, but attention. She thought of her younger self, always hurrying, always pushing. And she felt gratitude for the woman she had become, patient, present, alive. Her shoulders no longer carried the weight of years. They carried light, balance, and grace. She whispered softly to herself, "This is enough." The world around her quieted as night began to fall. Inside, everything felt aligned, body, mind, and breath. She took one last slow inhale, one final gentle exhale. Then she turned off the light, ready to rest. Because healing, she knew now, begins and ends in stillness. And in that stillness, she finally felt free.